Well, it's time for what I think we can safely say is the biggest sporting event on the Sioux Falls calendar every year, the Summit League Tournament, and we're here to break it down for you in this edition of the KDLT Sports Video Blog. I'm weekend anchor Zach Borg. This is our sports director, Mark Ovenden, also the host of radio show Calling All Sports. This is already the 9th Summit League Tournament in Sioux Falls. We're already approaching 10 years now. But of all, and I said it during our story in the newscast at 6 and 10 tonight, that it might be the most wide open on both sides because there's really a lot of parity, even on the women's side, which is maybe a little more unusual as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about that today on Calling All Sports. As I think back, Oakland was kind of dominant when this thing first got started here. Right. And then you got SDSU and North Dakota State. Between those three, I think they've won all the titles.
Yeah.
And this year, USD is the #1 seed, and they won the regular season championship, which was pretty incredible.
One senior on the team.
Right.
An almost complete roster turnover.
Right.
I mean, most of these guys hadn't. There were some transfers who'd played Division I ball, but most of them had not played together.
Yeah, they were getting used to playing together as a unit and got better as the year went along, and Tyler Flack's healthy. But your 8th seed could win the tournament. Your 8th seed could win the tournament. Well, will it? Probably not, but it could. And in the past, there were slaughter games for the first rounds in some of the games, and there's none of that either in the men or the women. You look at what South Dakota State's done. They were 1-6 in conference play, and they win 7 of their last 9.
Looked like they weren't even going to make the tournament at one point.
We were concerned a month ago that they weren't going to be in it, and that would just be horrific. But they come in on a roll. They not only made it, but they're playing really well. In fact, we had TJ Alzenberger on the show today, and we're talking about the fact that suddenly Chris Howell and some of these other guys have really picked up picked up the pace. I mean, now it's not just Mike Dahm anymore.
And you're still getting your, in some cases 50, but 20 to 30 from Mike Dahm. But now they've just kind of found their roles. And I guess to go along with the matchups, of course, USD, the only local team playing in the tournament on Saturday, they play at 6 o'clock against Western Illinois. They actually have played some close games with Western this year. I mean, I still think they have the best matchup of all 4 teams.
Right. But they could lose.
But yeah, they only won by 7 in Vermilion, and the game in Macomb they won by 11 was back and forth as well. Interesting stats with Craig Smith. He was telling me last week when we met him at the airport after they'd won their conference title. It's a team that has not lost 2 games a row in league play all season long. They've won 6 straight. They've played with a chip on their shoulder this year. They've admitted it because they were picked 7th, obviously, and that's due to part to the fact that a lot of people, we just didn't know what they had, really. Right. But they've kind of played that way, and I still think people are kind of underestimating them, saying, oh, well, North Dakota State's got experience. South Dakota State has Dahm. I still think they're kind of playing with that mindset that nobody really thinks we're going to do this.
I think they could very easily win the whole thing.
They're the hottest team going in. They've won 6 in a row.
Well, they're the hottest.
And they've done it convincingly, too.
South Dakota State's playing really good, too.
Yeah.
And when you consider where they were at.
Right.
To where they're at now.
And they've got the best player.
They've got the best player. Mike Dahm was player of the year in the Summit, and he's only a sophomore. He's come a long way since he set foot on campus when Scott Nagy wasn't sure he'd ever play. He can play.
He's probably going to play in the NBA.
We're going to see him in the NBA. He's the fact that he's as tall as he is and can go outside and make threes. He had one game with, 10 threes?
Yeah, the Fort Wayne. He had a pretty good year against Fort Wayne.
Boy, he scored 93 in their 2 games.
Yeah.
So go figure on that one. And Fort Wayne's the team that beat Indiana.
Yeah, so... by the way, the Jacks play Denver on Sunday at 6 o'clock. It's kind of interesting with Denver because they did lose early in the season, but they just beat Denver a week ago, 88-64.
Yeah.
That's my one fear with them. Yeah. They're playing so well. It can be a little deceiving when you beat a team that badly.
You don't want to turn around and play the team you just slaughtered. You just don't.
Yeah.
Now
Denver's not playing well. They're one of the teams that's playing the worst coming in because a few weeks ago, they were right up there for first place with the Coyotes and the Bisons. You still got to be antsy when you beat a team that badly and then have to play them right back again.
But at least they're playing with a lot of confidence right now. That's the key. Is this team? But to their credit, they never let that bad start ruin their season and hurt their confidence. So I think they're a dangerous team. But I like how Craig Smith's Coyotes are playing.
Well, it's a shame they're not on the opposite ends of the bracket, which we kind of thought they were going to be up until the last week when things went a little haywire in the league, because they would meet in the second round if they both win.
Yeah.
The meetings this year have been classics. State won in Brookings by 1. That was a game where Tyler Flack didn't play. They go back to Vermilion, and it was a 91-89 barn burner that USD won. If they meet up a third time, what do you think happens?
Somebody wins by 0. In other words, it's overtime.
I mean, they seem to be very evenly matched this year. I mean, and the other thing that I think that's exciting going forward, especially with USD, because as Craig said, they haven't had any continuity there. Most of these guys are going to be back next year. USD has the one senior in Flack who's really good, obviously, but they've got everybody back next year. State loses a couple of fifth-year guys who hardly had played here at all. So these are teams that are going to be here to stay. Before we go on to the women's, I did want to touch briefly.
I would say, just to kind of answer your question, the one thing South Dakota State does have an advantage over USD on is experience in these kind of games.
Yeah.
Because of the fact, like you said, the Matt Mooney's and people like that, they were sitting in street clothes watching the game last year. This is the first time that pretty much this whole team has played in this venue with this on the line. Keep in mind, remember, they're playing to represent the Summit League and the NCAA here. This isn't just the Summit League tournament. This is the go to the NCAA tournament.
It is interesting, though, because a couple of those transfers, like Mooney and Carlton Hurst, they played in the Mountain West tournament at the Air. Right. But this is... there's just a different vibe because you're going to have a different kind of crowd than what those guys saw at Air Force and Colorado State in Las Vegas.
Much better crowd.
Yeah. Before we go to the women's, I did want to touch on the other side of the bracket just briefly. We're not going to spend too much time on it. Who do you think comes out of that other side?
Let's talk about the women.
Well, with that note, by the way, the other two games, NDSU, IUPUI, that's after the Coyotes game in Fort Wayne, Denver.
NDSU comes out of that bracket.
I'm going to go with Omaha. I think they're the hottest one.
They've got great talent, but you never know which team's going to show up.
That's true.
Which night. So.
I could see NDSU getting beat by IUPUI because they've struggled down the stretch. The fact the Coyotes even won the conference title was in part due to the fact NDSU is kind of slidden. Okay, now on to the women's side. And this is where I say, again, the unpredictability of this year's tournament. This is the first time since 2011 that a South Dakota team, either USD or SDSU, didn't win the regular season title.
Right.
It was Western Illinois who took the 1 seed. You had a tie for second. IUPUI had the tiebreaker. USD comes in struggling. The Coyotes will start it off on Sunday against Omaha, who they've handled in the regular season, but that's a program that's kind of coming on a little bit. They've got Ellie Brecht, a Lincoln girl who had a good tournament a year ago, so you know she's going to be fired up. And
she can shoot.
And as you said, USD's not playing well right now.
Well, they were up until the last two games.
Yeah.
And actually the last game at Western Illinois, they played real well. They just happened to lose to a really good team.
On the road,
that game could have gone either way. The game that, and we had Don on Calling All Sports today, and I said, okay, I thought that was a typo when we got that score. I thought it was wrong.
Game.
What happened? They lost 63-42. This is a Coyote team that generally scores 80 points on anybody. In their sleep, they score a lot of points. She felt like their young players maybe let the moment get them a bit, and they tried too hard and they pressed too hard because they knew what was at stake. They knew that if they won those last two games on the road, they win the conference. And her feeling is that, you know, you wish you could stop what was going on, but you can't change that. You learn from that. And hopefully they got that out of their system coming into an even bigger stage than what they were on at IUPUI, playing in front of nobody. Now they're playing in front of a huge crowd. Again, this is the go to the NCAA tournament. It's called the Summit League tournament, but whoever wins this goes
to the play into the NCAAs.
And there's even an outside chance this year because
with the Jacks.
There's a chance that two teams from this conference could go to the NCAA tournament because this year the conference has elevated itself. I believe it's the 11th highest in terms of RPI rating, as opposed to last year when they were 16th. So there's a chance that two of these teams might, who knows, USD and South Dakota State might both make it.
Well, the team that has the best chance to make it in that at-large capacity is SDSU because they have the
strength of schedule.
Yeah, their strength of schedule, their RPI, last I heard, was 35. They're the 3 seed. They play right after USD on Sunday against Oral Roberts, a team that AJ still sounds kind of scared of them because they actually did beat Oklahoma this year, But they were kind of
How?
AJ claims they were banged up in the meetings we saw them this year. That Oral Roberts wasn't healthy. I don't know.
Do you remember what the score was
know,
in Brookings? They beat him by 40.
I'm just quoting the coaches here. They're saying
know,
that
but-
those guys that maybe they weren't at full strength when they came to Brookings.
Hopefully their whole team didn't get better in a hurry, because I can't imagine that being a game.
Yeah, that was 71-35 or something like that in Brookings. So it is a situation where we've had the last 4 straight years SDSU and USD have met in the conference tournament. 3 of them have been for the title. Of course, the one time SDSU didn't win was the semifinals. If they're going to play again this year, it would be the title game because they're on opposite ends of the bracket. Western Illinois is good. IUPUI is good. I'm almost kind of in the you have to show me that you're going to beat those two, because I still think those two are going to make the title game, State and U. Because until I see somebody knock them off, it's like with...
Well, Western Illinois has the coach of the year, the player of the year, but keep in mind that it came down to the last day.
Yeah.
And I think the awards came down to the last day, because both those awards went to the team that won the championship. Well, Omaha banks in a three-pointer
against SDSU
at the end of the game,
and there was
they don't do that, then you got a tie between State and Western Illinois.
I know there was another game too. I think it was either in Macomb or at IUPUI where SDSU had a controversial call where they were taking the lead. Aaron got teed up or whatever, and they ended up losing to another top team. So there were some moments where SDSU kind of could have easily slid into that title.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And of all the teams with that experience under their belt, I got to go with SDSU because of what they did at Stanford last year. Granted, Macy Miller isn't playing and hasn't played all year for the most part. So, and they're used to that. Mm-hmm. That's fine. That's history. They've gotten over that. And actually, after a little rough patch right after she got hurt, as in the one game against Louisville, which...
Well, they were also without Clarissa Obert for a while, too. And she's the
missed her
2-time
4 games.
Defensive Player of the Year.
Right.
So
I think that they've got that advantage that nobody else has of playing on the biggest stage. And I know that a few of the USD players, but not many, played on that WNIT run team. Yeah. I mean, Abby Fogg in the last month has been playing great. But she hasn't played that well all season.
Yeah.
She's come on strong at the end. Allison Arns played great for most of the year. She had a game at the end where she only had 2 points. So
J.C. Bradley was
they're young. The point
being
is they're young. They play 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores all the time, and then a senior. So, if you're looking for experience and edge in experience, it's South Dakota State's just by virtue of the fact that USD's team is so young.
Here's my question. Are we making too much of the experience thing, though? Because I remember when we talked to Craig Smith, we had him on our story. He said, this is why we played them in 15,000-seat arenas against Gonzaga. How much are we...
the women's side.
I mean, let's apply it to both. I mean, they've all played in big venues against some big teams. None of them scheduled easy this year. Are we making too much of the experience, or are we making too little?
No, we're not, because playing Gonzaga in a regular season, early in the season game is nothing like playing in the Summit League where you're playing to go to the NCAA tournament.
For your life.
You're expected to lose that game. There's no pressure when you go to play Gonzaga. None.
Right.
There's pressure when you play in the Summit League tournament.
Again, enjoy the tournaments. The semifinals are, of course, on Monday, and the championships will be on Tuesday. We'll have you covered all week long on TV, website, and all that stuff. Before we head out, congrats to a couple of other champions in the NSIC. We had the SMSU men win the tournament.
Yeah.
Northern State women won the tournament as well. And also the Northwestern men take the GPAC title. And our state wrestling champs as well, Pierre and Beersford Alcester Hudson. Congrats to all them.
And Dakota Wesleyan's women lost in overtime in the GPAC championship game. They're still headed to Sioux City as a number 2 seed in their bracket. The Northwestern women are going, both the Dakota Wesleyan and Northwestern teams go to the men and women's NAIA national tournaments that start next week.
We'll find out about the D2 field, too.
Find out about who makes it. I think Augustana, by virtue of the fact that Upper Iowa lost to SMSU, I think Augie's going to get in. That's just my gut feeling. If Upper Iowa had won that game over SMSU, Augie's done, because Upper Iowa gets the automatic berth, and then SMSU is going to get in no matter what. So,
Well, the last regional.
hockey fans, at least there's reason to hope, and we'll find out Sunday if they make
The
it.
last regional ranking they just released on Tuesday, on I think Wednesday, which
They
is
actually
right.
moved up to 6th.
Augustana went up to 5th. Actually, Upper Iowa was
Or
8th,
5th,
and
yeah.
right now, unfortunately, Northern State is the
9th.
last team out. So unless something bizarre happens, that's
but
probably how it's going to end.
If you have teams in other conferences that win that weren't your regular season
that's what I'm
winners.
saying. If something like that happens, but this could be pretty close to the final picture. We'll know the final picture in a week as to who's going to be representing the Summit League. Until then, enjoy and have a great March Madness month.